Hello, anybody who may be watching this. I don't know if there's anybody, but hi if you're here. So today we're talking about Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, Chapter 2, Debunking the Vulnerability Myths. I'm going to start with a quote. I don't want to do a whole bunch of quotes today, but that's where we're going to start. Sorry. Speaking about vulnerability, my curly hair, today's day 2 of wearing it. I don't wash it every day because it just dries my hair out. But wearing my hair curly is something that I'm very insecure about. So we're just dealing with it today. We're dealing with the struggle bus of the curl. So anyway, this quote: "Yes, we are totally exposed when we are vulnerable. Yes, we are in the torture chamber that we call uncertainty. And yes, we're taking a huge emotional risk when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. But there's no equation where taking risks, braving uncertainty, and opening ourselves up to emotional exposure equals weakness." End quote. So we're going to talk about the myths of vulnerability. And myth number 1 is vulnerability equals weakness. And wow, I feel called out because that's something I've always believed. It's something vulnerability is something I've avoided my entire life. So this is something, as a result, I'm very critical on myself as well as others when vulnerability or emotions that show vulnerability are displayed. The concept that vulnerability is the core of all emotions, neither bad or good, seems to me the very reason why I avoid it. To not feel the emotions that are tough, I don't like to feel them, so I avoid them. The problem with that is that when you avoid emotions, you tend to miss out on a lot of good things. The struggle is I don't want to feel the bad or dark emotions such as shame, fear, grief, anxiety, sadness, and disappointment. My nature is to add vulnerability to that list. I don't want to feel exposed. And vulnerability seems like the worst kind of exposure. I had told myself I wasn't going to use a bunch of quotes this week. However, I don't think I can put this into words any better than Brene Brown does in the book. And I believe this is the very important crutch about vulnerability. Quote, "Vulnerability is also the cradle of the emotions and experiences that we crave. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path." End quote. Damn. Those are all things I want in my life. It seems the very thing I have been avoiding for so long is the very thing that can help me get the things I want. Brene Brown defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Loving someone is being vulnerable because we are opening ourselves up to pain. Since we can't control all outcomes, we are allowing them to have a little piece of ourselves without being able to control the outcome. Will they love us back? Will we lose them in some way? I wonder if I am the only one who struggles with not reaching out to people because they haven't reached out to me. So I feel like they don't give a damn. Like, I've called them, I've gone to visit them, I've put effort forth that they don't. Then I'll turn around and think about how it may be more difficult for them to do those things due to their life circumstances compared to mine. The concept of if people want to be in our lives, they will make an effort can be precarious. Both parties have to make effort to make any relationship work, whether it's family or friends, or even work relationships. That being said, when I look at the sentence stem vulnerability is, here are some of the things that come to mind for me. Reaching out to someone I care a lot about when we haven't talked in a long time. Watching my kids become adults and letting go of them let them learn their own lessons. Also, as they become adults and other people come into their lives, having to sit and watch and see how things play out and not forcing my experiences or my thoughts on them. Sometimes that's hard because it's an effort to try to protect them. And sometimes it just causes more trouble than you're intending. And then trying to develop those relationships with those new people that come into their lives that may stay for a long time or forever. Also, vulnerability is putting myself out there on social media. This is terrifying to me. So many things about my physical appearance that I'm insecure about, and knowing people are mean and judgy. Anybody who puts themselves out there is, I think, very brave. This is not an easy thing to do. Even the most outgoing people, they're opening themselves up to so much. So it's very vulnerable. Wondering if my friends and family will care enough to watch this just in support of me and my efforts. I know probably most of them won't, and that's okay. And I just have to know that that's okay. Vulnerability is trying to date in a hookup society. Honestly, I've kind of given up on it. The society is so much about this hookup culture, and people aren't wanting commitments, which for a long time I was good with. After a while, it gets old. Loving my grandchildren so deeply. So, we have our kids, and there's a lot that we can't control about having our kids. But the very much them being there, you can control a lot more. With your grandkids, you love them so deeply. They still feel like a part of you. They still are a huge part of your life. You want them close, and you want to be able to do all the grandparent things. But it depends on their life circumstances surrounding their parents and their families. You don't ever know when things are going to change, and that's very hard to know. So that's very difficult. Asking for help is vulnerable. Working through past emotional trauma is vulnerable. I can go on, but these are some of my completions to that set in stone. Another quote that just has to be said is, quote, vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they are never weakness, end quote. So vulnerability makes, how does it make me feel? Well, scared, my heart races, I get anxious, I avoid things. I seem to procrastinate in a very unhealthy way when I'm feeling vulnerable. It feels like loss of control. Feels like just letting go. These are just a few of the emotions I feel. For me, vulnerability is making me want to stop what I'm doing right now, like this. It's making me want to stop this and just giving up, if I'm being honest. But also the need to stick with it and just let things happen. So whatever happens, happens. And that's hard because I can't control how people are going to react. I can't control if anyone's going to watch this. I can't control my next week self, because you don't, sometimes how you feel in the moment isn't how you feel later on. So, I mean, feels very vulnerable just to be doing this. I keep saying I'm going to try to stop saying it's just there. Sorry. Myth number 2, I don't do vulnerability. So the book includes this quote by Madeline L'Engle, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. It says, quote, when we were children, we used to think that when we're grown up, we would no longer be vulnerable. But to grow up is to accept vulnerability. To be alive is to be vulnerable. Wow. That's a great way of looking at it. So my background is in EMS, and so the people I know are in EMS, fire, some military, and those who dispatch us, the 911 dispatchers. And those are just a few of the professions that you're likely going to hear the I don't do vulnerability from. I know I've said it myself. I've heard it from many of my colleagues and peers. It seems to be something that's revered in these professions, not showing vulnerability or emotion. I can't help but wonder how many people who have worked in these professions would end up unaliving themselves, committing suicide, would have been saved if vulnerability could be viewed as more acceptable. Maybe if they were able to bring themselves to make a call and talk to someone, which is very vulnerable in those moments, they would still be here. We need to stop thinking of vulnerability as weakness and allow ourselves as well as others to display emotion. There are 3 questions Brene Brown says we should ask ourselves when we believe we don't do vulnerability. My answers to these questions are: number 1, when I feel emotionally exposed, I tend to get scared, angry, get real quiet, try to control things that are out of my control. I do tend to judge or seek solutions to problems I can't fix. I play the blame game. Number 2, when I'm feeling uncomfortable or uncertain, I tend to yell, cry, overshare, and many of the same things as in question 1. I blame, judge, try to control. Number 3, I am much more willing now to take emotional risks than I used to be. However, I still avoid them. At work, I have taken risks that have not panned out. This leaves me cautious to take them again. As I get more comfortable with my environment, I tend to just speak my mind. I've learned this isn't a good thing in many workplaces because people don't want honesty. In my personal life, I don't take many risks. Dating is something I've avoided for a very long time. And once you've avoided it for so long, it's hard to put yourself back out there. It's hard to take that risk. And it's hard to even know where to start. It's a nightmare. With family, I'm more willing to take emotional risks than I used to be, though I tend to shut down after many failed attempts. I will give people chance after chance after chance, and then when I'm done, I'm done. As much as vulnerability seems like something we can avoid, it's really not. Even if we don't do vulnerability, it does us, as Brene Brown says. Myth number 3, vulnerability is letting it all hang out. For me, this is difficult because I do tend to overshare, though it's generally not something important to me, if that makes sense. I work in the medical field, so I often overshare, or what feels like oversharing, my struggles with medical things. There are many things I don't share with people about my past life and experiences because watching others share theirs, people tend to think they're being untruthful. The number of times I've seen someone talk about life experiences, and as soon as they walk away, the people they told are like, there's no way they did that, or they're lying. It makes it difficult to share. It's difficult to build trust and find people to trust when you see how they respond behind other people's backs. I've been guilty of the same thing. What's funny is people tend to believe it's fine to do these things themselves, but terrible betrayal when someone else does it to them. I've had to learn hard lessons about oversharing, whom I give my confidence to, and who in turn will give them to me. Sometimes it's a trial and error thing, finding the right people to be, as Brene Brown refers to them as marble jar friends, is difficult. What would make a marble jar friend to me would be someone who checks on me in the hard times. It's crazy how many people call you a close friend, but as soon as things get tough for you, they bail. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture, just a text asking how I am and if I need anything. Someone who will be honest even when it's hard and remind me feedback is important if I have a less than stellar response. Feedback isn't something that's easy to take, but it's needed for us to grow as people. Sorry, I lost my spot. I am reading from a script, but it's one I just typed up just a little while ago. I tend to be very honest with people I care about and feel safe doing so. And that's the part that's hard. Sometimes being honest with people is hard just because you anticipate their response. And sometimes you don't feel safe doing it. So I do have people who I don't feel like I can be open and honest with. They aren't my marble jar friends. As I sit here thinking about this part of the chapter, I realize this part is very difficult for me because I've spent so much of my life avoiding close relationships that require vulnerability. It sounds odd because you will always hear people in EMS talk about their work family or what a family they are at work. In my experience, it is a dysfunctional family, but a family. A lot of us keep everything at the surface and don't forge deep relationships. We have fun together. We share the traumas that come with the job. There may be a few we can share our feelings about those traumas. I don't know how many times I've seen people work a call that we all know is traumatic. But the responders refuse to debrief or talk to anyone. Their response being, "I'm fine, these things don't get to me." I don't know how many of us tend to numb with a bottle, food, or other vices. It's easy to say they are close friends because they are by your side when you're doing those things that help to avoid the feelings. After a while, you want the people that help you deal with those feelings, not avoid them, to be your marble jar friends. They are few and far between. Also, with as close of friendships as you develop, many tend to no longer be around when you aren't working with them anymore, when you change jobs, careers, or move. So my question is, how, when this has been your life for so long, do you forge more stable, meaningful, valuable relationships? How do you find those marble jar friends? How do you develop those close relationships? I don't have many close relationships. I have a male friend that's a very close relationship. Well, friendship. He's my best friend here in Texas. And then I have one female friend that's a close friend that we've been friends for years and years. But she lives in Mississippi. I have some people that I confide in a little bit, but when they do things like I relocated to a town that's not far away, about an hour. It's where a lot of them come to shop and do things like that. If they call you when they're sitting down to eat at a restaurant and be like, "Hey, we're in town, you want to join us?" Well, no, because you're just now sitting down to eat and just now. I can't make it there in a reasonable time. Come on. They kind of fall out as your marble jar friends because, and I'm not as responsive to them either. So it's kind of on both sides. So anyway, enough of that little rabbit hole. So this brings me to myth number 4. We can go it alone. So I'm going to sum this up very quickly. Sorry, my eyes are very dry, so they water. I'm going to sum this up very quickly. No, we can't. People need connection. Eventually, avoiding connection catches up with you. Trust me, I know. From the way I now struggle to connect with others that I want to connect with, to the way my kids learned how to connect from me. When you see your adult children avoiding connections like you did for so long, it's a tough lesson to learn. It's okay to ask for help. It's courageous to show vulnerability. Sometimes you're going to get your ass kicked, and that's okay. Sometimes the ass kickings seem to be happening way more than the good things. But if you stay in the arena, ask for help when you need to, grow and learn from your experiences, eventually things will turn around. Allow the people you love to love you and to help you when they can. Love and be loved. So Vulnerability is a tough subject. Most of us just avoid it. I know I have for a very long time and probably still will some in the future. Let's be honest. Um, but I'm getting better and I'll continue to grow and continue to be just a little bit more vulnerable with the people who have earned that right. Um, Not everyone has, and not everyone will, and that's okay. So um, just remember to keep moving, keep growing, keep being better than the person you were yesterday. So next week we will talk about chapter 3, understanding and combating shame, aka Gremlin Ninja Warrior training. Hope everyone has a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye.